Yes, Your Honor. My name is Jimmy Palma, Palma.
Jimmy is Jimmy?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. All right, you may inquire, Ms. Edwards.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury? Let them know what you do for a living and your title and where.
Yes, I am a forensic scientist assigned to the firearms unit at the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office's Crime Laboratory.
And tell us a little bit about your background, your education. How did you become a forensic scientist?
I served 5 years in the Marine Corps, where I became familiar with different types of weapons. I obtained a bachelor's degree in chemistry from St. Thomas University, and once I was hired at the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office, I completed a 2-year firearms examiner training program, which covered everything from the very basic firearms safety and handling all the way up through the microscopic comparison of fired components such as fired projectiles and fired bullets, and compared those to actual firearms to determine whether those bullets or cartridge cases are fired from a particular gun. I have trained with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in the restoration of serial numbers and also in the cartridge case database. I am a member of AFTI, which is the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners. It is an international professional organization of forensic firearms like myself, and I am a certified member of that association.
Okay. How long have you worked in your current capacity?
I started at the Sheriff's Office February of 2011, so approximately 12 years.
And throughout that time, have you been doing forensic comparisons of ballistics or firearms evidence?
Yes, throughout my entire career.
Tell us a little bit about firearms and comparison. How is it that you are able to compare or analyze whether or not one particular firearm fired casings or any other parts of a bullet?
So the premise of what we do relies on the machining processes that are used to manufacture guns. During the manufacturing process, tools are used to cut, shape, and form guns, and those tools leave behind imperfections throughout the entire surface of the gun. So if you look at the gun, it looks rather smooth to the naked eye, but if you magnify it enough and start looking at the microscopic surfaces, you could see imperfections and irregularities throughout all the surfaces of the gun. Well, those imperfections and irregularities, when the gun comes into contact with cartridge cases and fired bullets, it leaves patterns from those imperfections on those casings and on those bullets. And those patterns are what we evaluate and compare between test fires of that gun and evidence cartridge cases and evidence bullets that are collected on different scenes and submitted as evidence.
Do you have any personal experience with seeing that in a manufacturing setting?
Yes, I visited various manufacturing gun facilities and also ammunition facilities, just observing the different types of manufacturing processes, which helps us understand what methods are used and what kind of tool marks to expect when looking at fired casings and bullets.
Can you tell us the types or parts of an actual bullet, such that we would understand your analysis?
The actual bullet? Yeah. So this is just an example of a single piece of ammunition. It's obviously it's blown up so that you could see it, but this is what we consider a cartridge, and it's composed of 4 different parts. You have the cartridge casing, you have the bullet or projectile, you have a small disc on the back called a primer, and on the inside there's gunpowder. So when a firearm is fired or shot, the firing mechanism of that gun is going to interact with this small disc called the primer. It's going to punch a small dimple onto that primer. That primer is going to ignite, so it's going to send a small spark into the cartridge. That ignites the main powder of that cartridge. As that powder is burning quickly, it increases in pressure and temperature, so you have pressure going in every direction. Being that this is supported, the cartridge is supported by the firearm, there's only really 2 directions in which the pressure can push. That's forward and backwards. So the forward pressure is going to essentially push the bullet forward and out of the barrel and hit the target. And at the same time, it's going to push the cartridge casing backwards. And in most firearms, that cartridge casing is going to push backwards, depending on the design, and it's going to get ejected, and it'll be found somewhere in the vicinity of the shooter.
All right. What are the parts of the bullet or the full live round that can be compared for analysis with a firearm?
So the fired component comes into contact with different parts of the gun. So the bullet is going to travel down the barrel and interact with the barrel, the inner surface of the barrel. So what you'll see is, since it's traveling perpendicular to those imperfections on the barrel, you'll see a pattern of scratches or striations on the projectiles. The cartridge case is going to come into contact with different parts of the gun also. Typically, it'll come into contact with what's called the breech face. There's other components called the extractor, which is responsible for pulling out that casing. And there's a third component called an ejector, which hits the casing and ejects the casing out. So there's different parts of the gun that interact with both the casings and the bullets.
So then it's possible to be able to do analysis using spent casings?
Yes, each one of those gun parts will, because they're machined in different manners, they'll each have their own machining processes or their own imperfections that we essentially can use to identify that gun to the fired components.
What about the bullet? What happens to the bullet portion or projectile once it is it goes through the front or muzzle of a firearm?
So once it exits the firearm, it essentially just hits whatever target is being pointed at.
Does it shatter or change form at all, do you know, if it hits a harder surface before hitting something else?
Bullets have the ability to break apart. I've seen bullets come in to the laboratory in pristine conditions, and I've seen them come in completely shattered and in just small fragments. So there's a wide variety. It just depends on what that projectile hits while it's traveling down the barrel or while it's traveling in the air.
Would you expect a projectile that hits a soft surface like someone's flesh to perhaps be more intact, if nothing else, interrupted the process from muzzle to target?
If it only hit flesh, then I wouldn't be surprised to receive a projectile intact. Bones is one of those components that it can hit, or other targets. But if it's simply flesh, then I wouldn't be surprised to see the bullet intact.
What if it hits another target prior, like a car window or parts of a car?
Can it become shattered? Yes, it can. Correct.
Okay. Can you tell us about the items that you received for comparison in this case?
I received 3 firearms. I received fired cartridge casings, and I received fired projectiles.
Let's start with the handguns that you received, if you received any.
Yes.
Tell us about, did you receive a 9mm Taurus?
Yes, I did. I received a Taurus model PT709.
And what can you tell us about that particular firearm?
It fires 9mm Luger caliber cartridges or ammunition, and it is a semi-automatic pistol.
And what does that mean as far as the firing mechanism and how the person would be able to utilize it?
So there are 2 types of automatic systems. There is a semi-automatic firearm, and there's a fully automatic. So with semi-automatic, if you pull the trigger and hold the trigger, you essentially get one shot off. The firearm cycles, ejects the casing, ejects the bullet, and inserts the next ammunition, the next piece of ammunition into the gun, ready to be fired. But in semi-auto, you have to release the trigger and pull it again if you want consecutive shots. So you essentially just get one shot per pull. With fully automatic, if you pull the trigger and hold it, the firearm will continue firing shots until you either release the trigger or you run out of ammunition.
Okay. Can you tell us the type of magazine that was presented to you with this particular firearm?
I received a what's called a box magazine, and it's just a magazine that is rectangular in shape.
And Judge, permission to utilize the evidence?
You may.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Mr. Palma, I'm approaching you with State 7, identified as Tyler Robinson's 9mm Taurus. Could you please open that box and let me know whether or not this is the same item that you were just referencing?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And do you have the ability to show us what the magazine looks like, or do you need assistance with a scissor?
I could take it out of the box.
Okay.
This is the magazine that was received with the Taurus pistol.
And can you tell us how much or how many bullets or casings that particular magazine holds?
This particular magazine is designed to hold 10 cartridges.
How many then, if this particular magazine is inside that particular gun, could this gun hold? How many bullets?
Well, the magazine holds 10 cartridges. There is the ability to have 10 in one, which is what's referred to as if you loaded 10 cartridges in this magazine, inserted it into the gun, racked the slide, you would have one in the chamber. Now you have the ability to take the magazine back out, put a 10th cartridge in here, and you would have 10 in the magazine and one in the chamber.
If that one in the chamber is ejected by a firing process, what happens with this particular type of firearm? Does it immediately reload from the magazine, or does the user have to do something?
No, this particular gun is a semi-automatic, so if the trigger's pulled, the first shot goes off, the gun automatically ejects the fired casing and inserts the next cartridge. It strips it off the top of the magazine and inserts it into the chamber automatically.
Okay. This magazine has been referenced to as a bit different from the normal type that comes in there. Do you know anything about whether or not that is true?
This magazine is what's called an extended magazine. This particular model, the 709, comes with a regular size magazine, which holds 7 cartridges. But this extended model holds 10. So I believe it sticks out just ever so slightly from the magazine well of the gun.
Okay. Are there extended magazines that hold a lot more than that for this type of firearm?
For this type of firearm, I'm not aware of any other magazines, but they could exist.
Okay. All right, thank you. If I may retrieve that item, Judge.
You may.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Palma, I want to now turn our attention to the next handgun that you received for analysis. Can you tell us about that?
You want me to refer to the 6-hour firearm or the
handgun, if you could.
The next handgun was a FN Model 5.7 semi-automatic pistol.
And can you tell us anything about this particular firearm and how it operates?
It is chambered for a 5.7 by 28 millimeter cartridge, and it is also semi-automatic.
Is that different than a 9mm cartridge, and if so, how?
There was a great deal of testimony concerning that. It is of limited relevance, however, so I'll allow it at this point.
There are no additional questions on this.
Oh, okay. Very well. Next question.
Judge, if the witness could answer that, though.
Go ahead, answer the question, Mr. Palma.
The 5.7 by 28 is basically a different size of cartridge. So the 9mm has certain dimensions that it meets, and the 5.7, which is different, has different dimensions, and that is consistent with the gun. So the chamber is also chambered for the same dimensions as the cartridge. But in terms of semi-auto, they're both semi-automatic.
Meaning they reload automatically, just like you just described with the Taurus?
Right, meaning that one pull of the trigger will give you one shot and cycle automatically.
Okay. And can you tell us whether or not when you received this particular firearm there were any live rounds?
I did receive
It is relevant, Judge.
It is relevant. Overruled.
I received a magazine and 20 5.7 by 28 millimeter cartridges or ammunition, unfired ammunition.
Do you know how many?
There were 20.
Okay. If we could turn our attention to the next firearm that you received for analysis.
Yes, the next firearm was a 5.56 by 45 millimeter Sig Sauer firearm.
What can you tell us about this firearm?
This particular firearm was also semi-automatic, and it fired ammunition that was 5.56 by 45 millimeter.
What about 223s?
223s. So 5.56 by 45 and 223s. If you look at the physical dimensions between those two cartridges, they're almost identical. 5.56 tends to be the military designator or nomenclature, and 223 is the civilian designator or nomenclature. And there are some minor differences in terms of the pressure on the inside of the cartridge. The 5.56 tends to have a little bit more pressure because, again, it's military designed. And the primer has, for 5.56s, they have a lacquer, and that is to prevent water from seeping into the gunpowder and wetting it and rendering it inoperable. So the specifications are a little tighter because they're military designed, but again, the physical dimensions are almost identical. So a 223 Remington cartridge can be fired in a 5.56 by 45 gun, just like the 5.56 can be fired in the same gun.
Okay. Could both of those types of ammunition be fired from this particular Sig Sauer?
Yes.
All right. How is the Sig Sauer operated such that it fires a projectile?
So in a similar fashion as the other firearms, the trigger's pulled, the projectile leaves the barrel, hits the target, and the gun cycles and ejects the fired casing and then inserts the next cartridge to be fired. That essentially will occur once the trigger is released and pulled.
Judge, if I could utilize the evidence to
You may.
assist in the testimony. And this might be better if I have the witness step down. It's a
All right.
larger item. Could I please have the witness step down?
Yes. All right. Step down, Mr. Palmer. Watch your step, please.
And I'm going to be utilizing, for the record, States 3.
Okay. And Mr. Palmer knows very well to point that in a safe direction, of course.
Yes, Your Honor. I don't think it's tie wrapped. No, it's not tie wrapped.
Okay. Mr. Palmer, please don't point that firearm at the jury. I know you know that, but okay. Could you please remove States 3 from the box that it's in so that the jury can fully see it?
Yes.
Can everyone see? Okay, wonderful. All right. Can you tell us whether or not that firearm, as you have it in your hand, has a magazine in it or around it or anywhere?
No, right now the firearm does not have a magazine inserted into it.
Okay. Can you tell us basically how the firearm would have to be operated by demonstrating how a projectile would be fired from it?
Yes, I'll try to do this without the microphone.
You can move over there by the, thank you. All right, thank you, Deputy Lubinsky.
So the magazine is inserted into this bottom magazine well here. And once that magazine is inserted, you can pull this lever back to rack one of the rounds into the magazine or into the chamber. When the trigger's pulled, the projectile travels down the barrel, hits the target, and again, the firearm will automatically eject that casing and strip that next cartridge out of the magazine and insert it into the chamber.
And can you tell us whether or not, upon squeezing this particular firearm, you have to squeeze it multiple times to get multiple bullets or projectiles out of it?
Yes, this particular gun will require pull of the trigger for each consecutive shot.
Okay. If you could replace the firearm, and if you could stay where you are, we're going to be utilizing another exhibit, Judge, with your permission, that's
Yes,
on that
ma'am.
table.
Go ahead.
For the record, this will be States 48, identified as the drum magazine. If you could provide it to the witness.
Mr. Palmer, you're going to open that. Thank you. Can you tell if that evidence bag has been opened previously?
Yes, it has, Your Honor.
Okay.
And has it been opened by you?
Yes, it has. I wrote the case number, my initials, and the date in which I opened the baggage on the bag.
Okay.
Would you like me to remove the contents?
Yes, please. Are the rest of the contents the casings or cartridges, rather?
The contents in the manila envelopes are the unfired cartridges.
Okay. And what's the count of how many you received, if you recall?
I received a total of 61.
Okay. Could you show us the magazine? What do you know about this type of magazine?
This type of magazine it's what's called a drum magazine, and this is the magazine that I use to test fire this firearm here that I just displayed. And this particular magazine holds 50 rounds on each of the drums, so a total of 100 rounds.
And can you tell us how this magazine would be utilized with the 6R firearm that we just saw?
Yes, you essentially just insert the magazine in that magazine well that I mentioned on the bottom side of the gun.
Okay. Is there anything specific about this type of magazine style that is any different than the type that we saw in the handguns?
The difference is the shape. So with the rectangular magazine, the cartridges are loaded vertically, where with the drum magazine, as you're loading the cartridges, they rotate, which allows more ammunition to be stored in these than the rectangular magazines.
And so this is able to hold a lot more or about the same as those regular magazines?
No, these hold a lot more.
All right, thank you so much. If you could replace those items in the bag.
Would you like Mr. Palmer to take the stand again?
If he could return to his seat.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Of the 3 firearms that you received for comparison, what's something that you do in order to ensure that you can do a comparison? Do you do any test firing at all?
Yes, I took the 3 firearms and I test fire them in a water tank that's approximately 15 feet by 4 feet. And the reason for test firing it into the tank is so that I could obtain those fired projectiles in a pristine manner. The water slows the projectiles down to avoid any damage to the projectiles. I also recover cartridge casings near me, and those test fires are the representatives of those particular guns, which I then use later on to compare to any evidence that's submitted.
And what is the purpose of doing test firing?
The purpose is to obtain those tool marks, again, those imperfections that are on the gun. The test fires are the representatives of those tool marks. So those tool marks impressed on the test fires are what I use to compare to the evidence.
Okay, and I'm going to be showing defense counsel what will be marked as states 5, 6, and 8, if I may approach.
You may. Yep.
I appreciate it. All right. Here. Thank you.
There's no objection to 5, 6, and 8.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, Judge, I'm going to be requesting permission to approach the witness with
You may. You're going to ask questions from up there, take the mic. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Palmer, can you please, first starting with, I'm not going to have you open it at this stage, so you don't need the gloves. Let's start with States 5. Could you please tell me whether or not you recognize that item that was just handed to you as States 5?
Yes, I do.
And what is it?
These are test fires that I bagged once I finished my examination process. Test fires from the 6 Sauer firearm.
And again, what do you use test fires to do in the comparison process?
I used these test fires to determine whether other evidence cartridge cases or projectiles were fired from this gun. The test fires are what display the imperfections from the gun, the tool marks from the gun.
All right. And to the best of your recollection, does that package appear to be in the same or substantially the same condition as the last time you saw it?
Yes, it is.
How do you know that?
Once I finished my analysis, I sealed the bag, initialed and dated the date in which I sealed the bag with a tamper-resistant seal.
All right. At this time, State is offering that into evidence, I believe, as Your Honor heard, without objection.
That was 5, right?
Yes.
All right,
States
5 is
five.
admitted without objection. Thank you.
Moving now to States 8. Same question. Can you tell me whether or not you recognize the item that was handed to you?
Yes, these are my test fires from the Taurus pistol.
Again, to the best of your recollection, does it appear to be in the same or substantially the same condition as the last time you saw it?
Yes, it is.
And were these the test fires utilized for the comparison in this case?
Correct, yes.
At this time, State would offer into evidence States 8.
States 8 is admitted without objection.
And finally, moving now to State 6. Same question. Could you tell me whether or not you recognize the item that you received?
Yes, these are test fires from the FN pistol. And they are also in the same condition in which I packaged them and I sealed them.
Thank you. At this time, State would offer into evidence State 6.
States 6 is admitted into evidence without objection.
All right. Now I will have you open something. So if you could put the gloves on. Do we still have the scissors?
I think it's up there. Thank you.
Handing the witness States 5, the 6R test fires. Could you open the bag and take one out so we see what it looks like?
Yes.
And Judge, I suspect, given the size of the item, that I might have to have the witness step down. Could I have permission for that?
Okay, yes, you do.
Do you want me to just take one test fire?
This one. Do you have casing and projectile, or just so they could see both, please? And if you could step down, and I'll hand you the microphone.
You may. Thank you.
Thank you.
Permission to publish that to the jury?
Yes,
By
you
the witness
may.
Going closer. You could just show them.
So here I have a fired cartridge casing. And This is the fired projectile, or my test fired projectile and cartridge casing.
And the caliber of that, or those, is?
Yes, these are test fires. These are 223 Remington caliber.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you could return to your seat. Tell us about the comparison process. What do you do next after you've done the test fired? And actually, before you answer that, did each of the 3 firearms that you received for comparison, did they actually operate as designed?
Yes, all 3 firearms functioned as designed. Yes.
Okay, so they were in working condition.
Correct.
All right, tell us about the comparison process.
So once I obtain my test fires, I use an instrument at the laboratory called a comparison microscope. And what it is 2 microscopes that are connected together by an optical bridge. It allows me to put one specimen on one side and the other on the other side, and I can superimpose the 2 images and put them side by side so that I could observe those tool marks right next to each other. The comparison microscope is what allows us to magnify and look at those microscopic striations and shapes, and that's so that once I place one item on one side and one on the other, I start looking at the tool marks, and that's what allows me to determine whether I have enough correspondence to make it an identification.
Are there times when, during that process, you find the results to be inconclusive?
Yes, there are times.
And what does that mean?
Inconclusive means that I could not identify or eliminate the test fire from that item for various reasons. Either the item did not mark well in that gun, or the item was too damaged and I was unable to see the striations, or those are really the major reasons why an inconclusive would be a result, a conclusion.
And what do you call it when there is a match or some kind of enough comparison, I think, that you can tell it's this firearm that fired that particular casing or projectile?
That's called an identification.
Okay. Let's start with the items that you received for comparison. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. In one submission, I received a total of 39 fired cartridge cases.
Okay. Did you receive any other submissions for comparison with the firearms?
Yes, I also received 3 submissions that had fired components, like fired projectiles, either a jacket fragment or a bullet jacket.
Okay. Let's start with the bullet fragments and the jackets. Can you tell us whether or not, based on your observation and your comparison, you were able to make any identifications with the various projectiles that you received, or bullet jackets or fragments?
No, I was unable to identify any of the fired projectiles to any of the guns.
And why was that?
These particular projectiles were badly damaged. Some of them were very small fragments. Some were partial bullet jackets. So there wasn't a lot of surface area on many of these projectiles, but there was a lot of heavy damage to just about every single projectile I observed.
And permission to utilize state's evidence, Judge?
You may.
If I could approach the witness with states 41A through HH.
You may.
If you could please take a look at the packet and then look up when you're finished. fair to say that the packet you received were autopsy photos?
Yes.
Okay. If I could also approach the witness judge with states 16 and 15, as well as states 2.
15, 16, and 2?
Yes.
All right.
And for the record, 16 and 15 are fragments that were collected and identified earlier and placed into evidence, and states 2 were the cartridge cases from
All
the
right,
shooting scene.
you may.
Okay, Mr. Palmer, can you tell me, and just select the first one and let us know what exhibit you've selected?
This is item 16.
And can you tell me whether or not you've seen that item before?
Yes, I have.
How do you know that?
I wrote the case number, the submission number, my initials, and the date in which I opened the packaging.
And is this one of the items then that you received for comparison?
Yes, it is.
And it's been identified as fragments collected from the vehicle. Can you tell us anything about whether or not you had any successful comparisons with this particular item?
No, I did not.
And why not?
There were various fragments that were collected. A couple of them were gray-colored magnetic metal fragments that didn't have any visible characteristics of having been fired from a gun. And there were 2 bullet jacket fragments that were inconclusive to the 6-hour firearm.
Is that because of any of the reasons that you discussed earlier?
No, the same reasons.
So they were either damaged or you just could not see sufficient markings?
Correct.
Okay. What about the next package, and if you could tell us what number you've selected there?
This is item 15.
Okay. Have you ever seen this item before?
Yes, I have.
Could you tell us whether or not you did any comparisons with this item, and again, what was it identified as?
This is item 15. I did do comparisons between this item. Again, I wrote the case number and my initials and the date on the packaging. And these were, I had 2 copper fragments that, again, did not have any characteristics, any rifling characteristics as having been fired from a gun.
Okay.
And I also had 2 jacket fragments that were also inconclusive to the 6-hour pistol.
And again, were you able to make an identification?
No, I was not.
Is that for the same reason, 2 damaged?
Correct, yes.
If I can approach a witness with states 42 and 43, projectiles from the decedent's body?
You may.
First, could you identify, just pick one, and then tell us what exhibit number it is.
This is item number 42.
Okay, and could you tell us whether or not you received this item for comparison, and there's sign of that on the package itself?
Yes, I did receive it. I examined it. And again, I have the case number, initials, and date in which I opened the packaging.
Okay, can you tell us about the comparison process? Were you successfully making an identification with these item, this particular item, or I'm not sure how many are inside?
This item was, there were 5 pieces of plastic in this packaging, and these were not further examined because they weren't consistent with having been fired from a gun.
Okay, what about the next item?
The next item is item 43.
And did you also receive this item for comparison?
Yes, I did. For the same reasons, I wrote the case number, my initials, and the date.
And any identification with this particular item?
No, this particular item consisted of a few lead fragments and a few gray-colored metal fragments that, again, did not bear any characteristics consistent with having been fired from a gun. I also had a fired bullet jacket fragment, actually four fired bullet jacket fragments, and those were inconclusive to the 6-hour pistol also.
And why is that?
They were heavily damaged. I didn't have enough correspondence between these and my test-fired bullets.
Okay. Is that typical when items are removed from bodies? Do you know?
It is typical.
If you could then go to the last of the submissions that was presented to you, the casings, and identify the exhibit number.
This is item 2. And again, I have my case number, initials, and date written on the packaging.
And could you tell us whether or not you were able to make identifications to the casings that were recovered? And do you remember how many you received for comparison?
Yes, I received 39 fired cartridge cases.
And tell us about the 39 fired casings and your identifications, if any.
Of the 39, I was able to identify 38 of the 39 cartridge cases back to the 6-hour pistol. The remaining cartridge case was inconclusive to that pistol, but it was of the same caliber. It was a .223 Remington.
And can you tell us anything about that one of the 39 that you were unable to fully identify and ruled inconclusive?
Yes, that cartridge case, I did not have a sufficient amount of correspondence to identify it to the gun. But again, the class characteristics, in other words, the caliber was .223, so it was consistent with this gun versus the other 2 guns.
All right. Thank you. So the 38 of the remaining casings, were those identified back to the 6R?
Yes, they were.
Okay. And that's this one that's sitting in front of us that you took out and showed to the jury?
Yes, that is the firearm that's in the large box.
Okay. All right. One moment to confer with co-counsel.
May?
No further questions at this time, but can I assist by removing all the items
Yes,
that piled up there?
please. And then while Ms. Edwards is doing that, take a stand up and stretch 90-second break, folks. All right. Cross-examination? Okay, you may inquire, Mr. Shiner.
Good morning, Mr. Palmer.
Morning, sir.
How you doing?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Good, thank you. Okay, so you're the expert for the sheriff's office in determining if cartridges were fired out of particular guns. That's one of the things you can do, right?
Yes, correct.
All right, so who sent you those cartridges? Was it Detective Anlin who asked you to analyze this?
No. The unit supervisor sends me an email and just tells me to work the next case, which that just happens to be the next case.
All right, do you know if Detective Anlin requested this to be done? If you look at your report, I see your name on that. That's why I was asking you.
Yes, the individual on the report is Detective Vanderland.
Okay, so do you know if she's the one who made the formal request for your department to check these things out?
That's my assumption based on what's on the report.
All right. But that's the way it normally works. The detective or whoever's assigned the case would make the request, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So just so I'm clear, I'm not going to take the gun out, but I'm sure we're talking the same one. Mike. The 6 hour states number 3 that you took out, that gun is a legal gun, right? Legal.
Can you say that again?
This gun is legal, right?
To my knowledge, it is a legal firearm, yes.
All right, nothing illegal about this, right?
Not to my knowledge.
If I wanted to buy 10 of these and put them in my house, as long as I'm not a convicted felon, I can do that, right?
Correct.
The person who owned this gun, you don't know anything about him, right?
I do not.
You wouldn't know if his father was tragically shot in the head. You wouldn't know any of that, right?
Oh, no. You better approach on this one.
I can move on. I'll save time. Let me move on.
Very well.
All right. You don't know anything about the owner of this gun.
No, I do not.
All right. You don't know anything about this case in terms of interviews, in terms of what evidence was seized or not seized. You just got this, and this is what you do.
Correct.
And you didn't have any conversations with any of the police officers involved in this case, right?
I did not have conversations, no. I once the case is completed, it's typical for us to send a report to the detective who requested it, which is Detective Vanderland. But I did not have conversations with any detectives or anyone.
You were just showing the autopsy photos. You've never seen those before, did you?
No, I've never seen them.
All right, let me show you what's been entered into evidence as
We're working on the elevator.
thanks. Defense exhibit number 19. You ever see this before?
I have not.
All right, does this look consistent with someone possibly holding a gun prior to death, based on your opinion?
Does it look consistent with someone holding a gun?
Possibly holding a gun prior to death, assuming this is the decedent.
Overruled.
Do you know? I'm not asking if it definitely was. I'm saying, is it possible?
Oh, is it it's possible.
Is it consistent? If you know. If you don't know, that's okay.
Oh, no.
Okay. You don't get called out to scenes where people are holding guns, do you?
No, I do not.
Let me make sure. Let me ask you this. I mean, you've shot thousands and thousands of guns probably, right?
Yes, I have.
And number 19, if assuming, would that be the similar position to my hand if I take a gun? If you know, and we can try it here if you don't know. If I take a gun in my hand and then take it out, would my hand be in a similar position if you just take the gun right out?
In general, that position of the hand looks like how you would hold a gun, yes.
You don't know anything about this case, about rigor mortis and when the person was found. Nothing like that was told to you, right?
No, I don't know anything about it.
All right, what you can tell us is the 38 of the cartridges, what is this? 38 of the cartridges that were submitted by somebody from law enforcement, probably crime scene, right?
More than likely it was crime scene.
They matched that 6 hour.
Correct.
Nothing about any of those cartridges.
Sorry, for the record, you're going to have to use the proper terminology, okay? All right, so it's not
Casings.
cartridges, it's
Casings.
cases. Yep.
Thank you, Judge.
All right,
Sorry.
yep.
The shell casings.
Yes, 38 of the 39 cartridge casings were fired from the 6 hour firearm.
And the cartridge casings, nothing about those are illegal, right?
No, not to my knowledge.
All right, and the drum that we saw that holds 150 on each side, if I want to own 1,000 of those, I can put 1,000 in my house?
To my knowledge, it is not illegal to own one.
About 100.
It is not. I don't know anything wrong with that. I don't have any knowledge of that being illegal.
Okay. How about the pistol, the HN pistol? Is it HN? Is that what you call it, or HR?
There's an FN.
FN, sorry. It's been a long trial. So the FN pistol, is anything illegal about that?
No, I did not see anything illegal about that gun.
Okay. And how about the Taurus? You know if that's illegal or
No.
illegal?
There's nothing illegal about that gun.
Okay, so it's a legal gun,
Yes,
assuming it was purchased properly and the person doesn't have a conviction of a felony, right?
correct.
All right. You're not a law enforcement officer to determine if somebody's carrying a gun properly or not properly. It's not something you do.
No, I'm not.
You're a civilian employee with the sheriff.
Correct.
And your expertise is firearms.
Yes, it is tool mark examinations.
Okay, so you could determine possibly, if we don't know, if we find cartridges, I don't know the proper term. Is it shell casing cartridges?
Fired cartridge casings.
Thank you. So if you find one of those and a gun is not found, maybe a month or two later, you could say, did that particular gun fire those cartridge casings?
That is correct. I could also, if there isn't a gun discovered, I could also compare the casings to each other to determine whether they were fired from one or more guns.
Are all those guns potentially deadly if somebody gets shot with them?
Every gun is deadly if someone get shot with it.
Well, if that Taurus is, let's take the Taurus. If you see, I'm not going to do it, I'm just hypothetically, if I take that Taurus from where I am here and you're there, and I point it at you, would you be able to see if it's loaded?
No,
Would you be able to tell if there's a bullet in the chamber?
no.
And you agree that's called an extended clip that was provided to you from that firearm?
For the Taurus
Yes.
pistol, yes, that was an extended magazine.
Okay. Did that gun come with hollow point bullets?
I'm sorry?
Did the gun, the Taurus, come with hollow point bullets?
I don't have any notes in regards to the type of projectiles that were in that particular type of gun.
Did you look at them or examine them or not?
I did. I know that they were 9mm Luger. 6 of the 10 were a Norma brand, 3 were Cellier and Below brand, and 1 was a Hornady brand.
So it's possible they were type of bullets that would expand upon impact?
It is possible.
Could you look at them now and tell us?
I could, yes.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'll show you defense states number 7 that's been entered into evidence. If you can tell us, if you can help us out with that question, please, about the type of bullets that were in there in terms of they are the kind that expand upon impact. I thought that was a coffee container when you first came in. I didn't know that was a bullet.
So of the 10 cartridges, 9 are full metal jacket, and 1, which is the Hornady brand, is a hollow point projectile.
Oh, just one.
Just 1.
Do you know what sequence in the gun the hollow point was in?
I do not.
And you don't know, so you got 10 cartridges, right?
Yes, sir.
On that particular gun, is it in the box tied up or can you hold it up?
It is not tied up.
Can you hold it up a little bit?
Yes.
Can you show us where a bullet would be ejected from there?
The bullet or the fired cartridge case?
Fired cartridge casing, thank you.
The fired cartridge case is ejected from right here, which is called the ejection port. Once it's fired, it just kind of pings out. The gun ejects it, and it lands in the near vicinity.
I'm sorry, do you know how far it would go?
No, it varies. Honestly, the gun is designed to extract and eject to the right, but there's a lot of variation in terms of where the casings eject. But it's usually in the near vicinity.
All right. If someone knows how to use that gun, is it easy to take a bullet out of the chamber?
Are you talking about an unfired cartridge?
Fired cartridge.
Yes, all you have to do to remove a piece of ammunition from the chamber is just pull back the slide.
Yeah, you have no way of knowing when that gun may have been fired, do you?
I do not.
Could you tell if that gun was ever fired?
I could not tell. At the time I test fired the gun, I did not look for that.
Okay. No one asked you to do that?
No.
So if I'm holding that Taurus that you have in your hand in my, let's say in my right hand, it would eject to my right?
Yeah, it's designed to eject to the right.
Okay.
But there's times where, a casing jumps up and hits me in the top of my head. So again, it's designed to eject to the right, but there's a lot of variation there.
All right. And how about, thank you, put that in there. How about the Sig Sauer firearm that we talked about? Does that eject from the right also?
It's also designed to eject to the right.
Anyone ask you to do any study about how far these may have went and how they would have landed in a certain area?
No.
Would you do that if someone asked you?
I've never done that.
All right. When you get guns, do you ever look in database? Do you ever look as part of your job when you get firearms to look in any kind of databases to see if the gun was stolen or where it was purchased or anything like that?
There is a database, NCIC, FCIC, that detectives use. We don't use it as firearms examiners. There is another database of fired cartridge cases.
All right, tell me about the one that you know detectives use. What is that called?
It's NCIC, FCIC.
What is that?
It's a database of items, guns, cars, and other items that a detective can type in certain information about that item, and it'll pull up if that item has been stolen or at least submitted as stolen.
To your knowledge, is there any databases somebody who's in law enforcement can look or try to find to show when somebody bought a particular gun, who the original purchaser was?
That's my general knowledge. I've never used it, so I'm not very familiar with it, but I know the basics.
Do you believe they could find out possibly who the purchaser was and when it was purchased?
That's my understanding.
Okay. Did all those, I think you answered this from direct, but all those 3 guns that you examined, they all worked properly?
Yes, they did.
And based on your training and experience, do you know what an intermediary target is?
I don't know. I can imagine. I could assume what an intermediary target is.
I know you wouldn't know in this case, but what does that mean to you? Can you?
It sounds like something in between 2 objects.
Right. Okay. So I think you testified earlier that if it's an intermediary target, that would possibly have an effect on the direction of a bullet.
What I stated was that bullets go in the direction in which the barrel is pointed.
What if it hits something first?
What about it?
So let's say hypothetically it hits a car. Would it then possibly go a different direction? Or
It can, yes.
glass even?
It can, yes.
And then you had all those little particles. Some you said were plastic. Some you said were possibly from a gun. You couldn't tell, right?
Yes, some were not consistent with a gun and some were.
All right. And is it common for a bullet hitting, let's say hypothetically, a car, and when inside a car, the pieces break up of the bullet?
It's common,
Okay.
yes.
And you would have no way of knowing the trajectory if it's bouncing around the car or which way it would go, would you?
No, I would have no way of determining that.
Okay. How about a pressure pull on a trigger? Did you check those in this case?
Yes, I did.
Let's talk about the Taurus. What was that approximately?
The trigger pull, which is essentially how much force is applied before the firing mechanism drops, is what's considered the trigger pull. And the Taurus pistol had 2 different trigger pulls because of the type of design the Taurus pistol had. The 2 types are called single action and double action. And what essentially that the single and the double imply is that with the pull of the trigger, single action just does one action, drops the fire mechanism. In double action, the pull of the trigger is going to do 2 actions. It's going to cock the firearm and it's going to release the fire mechanism. So I tested each one. In single action, the trigger pull was between 6 and 7 pounds to release the fire mechanism, and in double action, it was between 5 and 6 pounds.
Is that normal for that type of gun?
Yes, it is.
Is that relatively light trigger pull, medium? How would you classify it?
No, it's a normal trigger pull. It's typical.
Right. If I had that Taurus in my hand and I tried to shoot it, but I didn't rack it back first. Well, you explain. How would I, if I own that gun or you own the gun and you wanted to use it, how do you actually get it to work?
So if you have the gun and it's not loaded, and you insert the magazine, and let's say the magazine is loaded, you have to rack the slide back because you have to insert a cartridge into the chamber before you can fire it. Now, once that first round is loaded and you fire the shot, at that point, the gun automatically ejects, cocks, and prepares the gun for the next trigger pull.
All right, so hypothetically, if I have that gun and I don't rack it back, or I don't have time to rack it back, and I try to shoot it, nothing's going to come out, right?
Yes, if that chamber is empty, nothing will happen.
Okay. How about the Sig Sauer firearm? That particular firearm, when you load it, you said you just put the drum inside of it and it goes up vertically, the bullets? Or how did you describe that?
So you insert the magazine, but just like all the other guns, you still have to rack the bolt back so that that first cartridge can insert into the chamber.
Gotcha. So did you try to do that, rack it back?
I did. When I inserted the magazine with my test fires loaded into it, I inserted it, I had to rack the bolt back, again, to insert the cartridge so that I could fire it.
Did it work properly?
It did.
Was it hard to do?
No, it was not.
How about the trigger pull on that Sig Sauer? Did you test that out?
Yes, the 6 Hour operated at single action only, and that trigger pull was between 7 and 8 pounds.
Similar to the Taurus?
It's similar to the Taurus, yes.
And every time if I'm shooting it, I got to pull the trigger back and forth?
Yes, if you want to set off consecutive shots, every time you pull the trigger, you get 1 shot.
All right. Do you know how long it would take to shoot 39 shots?
No, I've never timed it, but you can shoot as fast as you can pull the trigger.
Okay. So it depends on every person's ability.
As fast as they can pull the trigger, correct.
Okay. And just so I'm clear, you said the Taurus had single and double action. Why does the 6 Hour only have single action?
It's just per design. The manufacturer decides what type of design they want to make their firearm.
Okay. And what's the difference between single and double?
The single action, the pull of the trigger is going to perform 1 action, which is releasing the fire mechanism. With the double action, the pull of the trigger cocks back the fire mechanism and releases it. So it performs 2 actions.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any redirect? One question. Okay.
Mr. Palmer, with the Taurus that you received for comparison, if you had 10 bullets in that magazine, is it true that only 1 other bullet could have been in that firearm?
It's true that when you insert the magazine with 10 rounds, it is true that there could have been 1 cartridge already in the chamber.
And if there's no cartridge in the chamber, and I do recognize that is question number 2.
Mm-hmm.
If there's,
I was counting.
if there are no cartridges or live rounds in the chamber, and you only have the 10 full ones that are in the magazine that holds only 10, then fair to say that's all there was.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm told the lunch is here. I think I'm going to have some more. Well, let me find out before I send you back for lunch.